Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. My guest today is the founder of Encoraco. She's going to kill me if I pronounce it wrong. A coaching and consulting company that focuses on helping high-achieving entrepreneurs, professionals, and executives design a plan for their lives when they retire from their current endeavors. You're also a lawyer, speaker, and an author for a book that's about to come out. And you're from Arizona in the USA. Please welcome Elizabeth Zelinka Parsons.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to this because I think it's one of these topics that people kind of don't have a conversation about, but they should. So
yes.
Before we delve into it, let's kind of learn a little bit more about Elizabeth. You know, your own kind of career, how you got into being a lawyer, but as a child and growing up.
Sure. Yeah. I chuckle when I get asked this question because if I were to start, from my background, I'd say I've always been one of these little high achiever types. The subtitle of my book is A High Achiever's Guide to Thriving in Retirement. And I am somewhat self-deprecating when I say that because like many of my clients, I sort of always measured my success and accomplishment by sort of these external inputs, in school being the obvious one. So, my whole way through my academic life, I wanted to pursue hard things. And, I wanted to be a veterinarian, and then I wanted to be a heart surgeon. And then when it was clear I was never going to be good at chemistry, I pivoted to economics and law. And so anyway, I just, ended up at a very large law firm after going to law school at night, working full time, and, was really thriving on this very challenging existence that was about to kill me, frankly. So when I woke up one day, 10 years into this career with two small kids, I finally hit the wall of what I could just brute force myself through. And it was then I made the decision to leave Washington, D.C., leave this very big law firm I'd worked so hard to get into and do well at. And that's when I moved to Arizona, because I truly realized, I have hit the wall on what I can do 24 hours a day. So, the funny thing is that particular change is what ultimately led me to the work I do now, because base jumping out of my life like that was extremely difficult in ways that I had no idea were coming. Just total loss of my identity and my life structure. And it's a lot of the same themes that people face when they retire. So ironically, it was my own big change that set me up to have to do the deep work to kind of reinvent myself and reinvent my life. And that's what I help my clients do.
I mean, it's something that I do. I have a partner. We do brain gym fitness. And it's kind of like asking yourself the question of what do I really want instead of fitting in, because unfortunately we've been conditioned in the education system, fit in. If you do exactly as you're told, sit down, be quiet, get good results, you're brilliant. Instead of being creative, you're bad. And in business as well, like the entrepreneur, let's attack the entrepreneur, and the person that goes into the corporate world, brilliant, we look after you. And it's a shame that it's like that, but it's good that there's more people that are actually coming out and kind of saying, hey, this isn't the way it should be.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's why I chuckle at myself, because I felt like I was, not anyone did it to me, but I put myself on a little ladder and just started climbing like crazy without asking where I was climbing to. So, yeah, I tend to work with people coming out of careers that have done something similar, but they just did it for longer. And honestly, kudos to them, because it takes an incredible amount of capacity and commitment to do that. But the longer I think you do that, the harder it is to flex your own imagination muscle and ask yourself what you really want. I mean, that question is just like circuit overload for somebody who's been doing what everyone else wants, for 40 straight years.
So the company, the name, how did the name come about?
So it is, funny, because our sort of marquee program we've been providing to clients for 16 years now. We named the program Encore because it was sort of like, first of all, hearty applause for the performance that you just completed. And what's next? Like, come on, let's see what's next. And, sitting in a rocking chair, staring out at a pasture all day is not what's next for anybody I work with. That terrifies them. So, when we were sort of looking to think about how to offer our product and service more widely and create versions of programs that could apply to a broader swath of people, we wanted to tie the name of the company back to that program, mainly because we have a core audience of, big fans of the work we do. So that's really where the name came from. It's and it's also just, frankly, I think, you've got to come up with something unique enough you can get a website. So it was one of those brainstorms,
Brilliant. The way things are changing, a lot of the times people go through, I suppose, their career, and when they're told it's time to go, here's your watch or whatever they give you, and it used to be 60, then it's 65. It's probably going to be 95 soon. They just keep increasing it. And it's kind of then that people have a realization. But I think you're kind of trying to get people kind of sooner to kind of make that transition. Yes, correct.
Yes, you're exactly right about that. So ironically, I think when you think of, government benefits, they seem to be drifting toward older ages, that we're going to see those kick in later in life. But what's a bit ironic is that what I'm seeing, certainly in the U.S. market more, although I work with global organizations that have, offices and people all around the world, what we're seeing is these very successful, big organizations, and let's just even focus on investment banks or law firms and that kind of thing. There is pressure really to retire earlier. So we're increasingly seeing people in their mid to late 50s being asked to retire. And in other words, you've been here long enough. You should be reasonably, secure financially by now. And we've got younger people who need to come up and claim these opportunities. And so if I focus on law, 30 years ago, people expected to stay with their firms and glide out over many decades slowly, right? And, you'd still see people in their 80s coming into the office and just sort of relaxing and chilling. That's not the case anymore. So when you leave a career, sometimes with some pressure to leave, it's very daunting to ask yourself what you'll do next when you're only 55 or 60. You've got another big chapter ahead of you, and it doesn't mean you need to jump into another career necessarily. But I think most people want to feel they've got purpose and engagement and meaning in their lives beyond, just pure leisure. So that's the challenge.
I saw somebody recently doing a calculation of like the money that you get when your retirement fund, monthly or whatever. And he was encouraging people to leave earlier because he worked it out. You're getting less, but if you take it into account and you live to a certain age and everything, it was working out so much better. And obviously you can do other things and enjoy your life. Whereas some people think, like you say, people go, oh, I'll buy the holiday home or I'll get the camper van and everything. And the reality is if you're 67 or 70, some people are in fantastic condition, but the rest, sometimes the energy levels aren't there. The motivation, or maybe a spouse passes or something like that and things change. Yeah. And you ended up working all your life for a dream that kind of never happens.
Absolutely. I remember one client of ours said it so well, and it stuck with me as this mantra. He's somebody who, to your point, really enjoyed challenging physical vacations. And, he was a very fit guy. And I think he was right around 53 when he had the revelation walking down the sidewalk in New York City. He said, I think I've only got 17 summers left to do the things I really like to do when I travel. Like, what am I doing? I got to get out of here and get busy living the rest of my life. And I just thought that was a really, stark way to put it. You start thinking of it in that way. And it doesn't mean maybe north of 70, he's fully out of the physical game, but I think he was just suggesting to himself, don't count on it, right? You really might only have 17 summers left to do this stuff. I thought that was such a interesting way to put it. And it draws like a very bright line right in front of you.
Yeah. And the other thing is like on the financial side, because like I'm turning 52 in October, and like in Ireland you're able to take your pension when you're 50, and so I did. I just took it because it was like, what's the point? Because I could see. Well, the problem is there's so much corruption because people think, okay, if it goes up X amount per year, and I was looking and was saying, if it goes up this, great. If it goes up this, it just never went up. And I was like, yeah, you're making money. And that's not just in Ireland, that's all over the world.
Sure.
And like, so the thing is, you think they've got your best interest at heart, but they've got their own interest at heart. And like, you can kind of look after your money. I mean, there's risks as well, because, you know, like your retirement fund can put into real estate and different things like that. So you have to be careful as well, because you can get wiped out. But
for sure,
I think with the right advice, is that something that you look at on the financial side, or is it more on the kind of emotional and kind of, you know, side of things?
It's a great question. So we are definitely not financial planners, and we don't focus on that. But I'll tell you where we do address it. So our overall program is about it. Really, there were two fundamental things going on for all of us when we leave a career that's been intense. Certainly, you've got to kind of bridge your identity and understand yourself in new ways, and think about, okay, how am I still going to be me in these new ways in life? And, you know, so if you've understood yourself as a doctor or a lawyer or, whatever, a teacher, a salesperson, it doesn't matter. I mean, that has a huge amount to do with how we see ourselves. And so you've got to think about how that changes. And then the structure of your life changes too when you set down a full-time career. But beyond that, what we always tell people is you're about to move from saver to spender. You know, you've been saving money your whole life for this moment. You can retire. And that's what you're comfortable with, is socking away your money, if you've been able to save, and presumably you have, if you can retire. So now you've got to get comfortable with the notion that maybe you don't have any income anymore that represents, work. Like the income loop is not there. And you've got to get comfortable beginning to think about spending down what you've saved. And that's a very challenging transition for a lot of people. And it doesn't matter how much actual money they have. You know, there are plenty of people we work with who've got a lot of money, but the idea of spending it makes them very uncomfortable. And I think, to your point, because none of us control every, externality that could affect our finances, it's also anxiety producing, to not have income anymore, because what if the market tanks? What if some investment I'm in goes south? So it's an issue we talk about, but more on the psychological level than on any sort of strategy to improve their security. We assume they've got professional people helping them do that.
Okay. And I suppose let's get into the mindset of somebody, because I mean, especially if, like, not the entrepreneur type, because there's two types. You've got the entrepreneur, they'll try anything and they'll fail, but they'll build up the skill set and they realize it's all about people. But you've got some, whether it's the doctor, solicitor, that some people have just one career, or an accountant, and that's what it is all the time.
Correct.
Like, that must be a different conversation for you. That must be it.
Yes. Very different conversation. And, I love that you used the word mindset, because it's a word we bring up a lot with our clients. And the biggest shift for people like that you just described, and I say this because I've been one of them, so I'm speaking, also from a very personal place. But we are, as professionals, excellent reactors, right? We react to what everyone else needs of us. So you have problems or issues or tax returns or medical, problems or legal issues. You react to them. So you have this constant stream of content coming at you from other people who look to you as a master and an expert who can solve their issues. And that's what you do all day, right? You show up and you're good at what you do, and you fix things for people. And so when all of that goes away all at once, that is alarming. I mean, you are sitting there suddenly with no stream of content coming at you, and all these skills you have no application suddenly. And you're now being asked to be the creator in your life. The same letters are in the word reactor and creator. So I always say that you've got to shift from reactor to creator. But if you have not been the one authoring your days and your weeks and your years the way an entrepreneur probably has, it's a very scary idea. And in fact, you don't even know where to start. It's like asking somebody who has not been sort of dealing with the blank slate for a very long time to suddenly start creating the content. So a lot of what our program is about is helping people get into that headspace. We shake the snow globe a little bit, get them thinking differently, remind them of all these things they probably haven't focused on in a long time. And then we start getting creative together about what's possible. And then you've got to become that person who's willing to experiment, because the professionals don't experiment for a living, right? They get it right. So you've also got to drop the need to get it right and focus on how fun it is just to try things and get the data from what is going to be a big grand experiment, and then iterate from there. And those are kind of foreign concepts for a lot of our clients.
Some people, when they choose a profession, they get into it because they kind of think, oh, this is going to be financially rewarding, and they end up hating their job. But there's others, they just adore it. They got into it for the right reason. They're very good at it. And then perhaps the company gets to a certain level. Do you ever kind of encourage people, because they have such passion and that's their full skill set, to kind of go into startups, or actually where they're like an associate director or something, where they're just coming in a couple hours a week, but they're moving around?
Absolutely. So, again, very insightful, because this concept is what we often encourage people to do who maybe don't need another huge income stream. We talk to them about designing almost a mosaic. Think of their lives as a mosaic. Okay, so up until now, maybe your career has been this big monolithic thing, right? It's taken up most of the space in your life, and then you tuck your relationships and maybe your exercise and your health and your friends around the edges, and you kind of squeeze that in where you can. Now, what you really have the opportunity to do is design this thing in a perfect way for yourself. And so we think of it like a mosaic, because there may be pieces of your professional life you can pull forward, but just not in this huge way, right? You pull them forward in ways where they fit nicely with these other parts of your life that you might have neglected. And so we see people do exactly the kinds of things you're talking about. I mean, they've got the wisdom of experience and phenomenal skills, and there's almost always a way to apply those in a much more controlled fashion, so that they can now make space in their lives for the things they've deferred, like travel, or deepening their friendships, or reconnecting with people they used to know, from other parts of their lives, even just working on their marriages, getting more involved with whatever their young adult children are doing. But there are hobbies, that they set down a long time ago. So we look at this as an opportunity to light up all those areas of your life. And it doesn't mean you got to set your professional self down entirely, but it does suggest maybe reshaping it and putting it into a different, balance with everything else.
And I mean, just the profile, the clients that you deal with, and you do speeches with like law firms and stuff like that. So I presume it's like high-end kind of clients as well. But if we look at kind of the broad spectrum of this, because I know some people, they retire and they think they're going to survive on the retirement, and it ends up being half, and then they have to be like a greeter at Walmart or something like that, and it's like they never dreamt of that. Like, so what, when somebody is in that situation or about to face that situation, what's the best way to handle that?
So I think that that's a completely, reasonable and common situation. And so what I think, one of the things we talk about with people who might still need to generate an income stream for themselves, which is completely reasonable. I mean, I think that can be so rewarding anyway, is, first of all, there are a couple themes that I've seen. Number one, everybody would like a break. Right. So even if you do know you probably will need to continue working in some way, I suggest to people, take a sabbatical, right? Just call it a sabbatical, and give yourself, even if it's 6 months, just give yourself a break so that you can really sink into the idea that you have set down this intense, demanding thing called a career. And tell the world that's what you're doing, because that implies you're not gone for good. You're coming back. You're not off the mat completely, right? But while you're having that sabbatical, what you've got to recognize is your number one asset is your relationships with other people. And you said this about entrepreneurs. They know this in their DNA, but we tell people who've been climbing ladders their whole lives, the thing you want to do next is not going to be something that's advertised as a job. You're too senior. You're too, you're too advanced. What you need to do is think about what it is you want to do, how you can truly be useful, and then begin working through the human beings that know what you're good at, know who you are, and know what you can do. And you've got to create your way to that opportunity. Often it's something you will shape yourself. You will create yourself. And maybe you'll find something advertised. But the truth is, most of the people we work with, when they're responding to ads for jobs, I mean, they are so overqualified for these things. They make no sense. And then their confidence takes a spiral because they're like, what's wrong with me? Nobody's calling. It's like, you got to go create this thing. And you've got to believe that through, what you already know how to do and the people you already know, you will find your way to or create a perfect arrangement where you can earn some money, make a contribution you're proud of, work with people you like. You've got to have that vision, right? Nobody's going to drop it in your lap. So that's part of why we help people really think about what that could be.
And for those that have the financial means, then, you mentioned the sabbatical, which I think is, it's ideal. Like, ideally, they should kind of step away from their residence. Not saying to give it up, but to kind of go to a holiday home or go to a different country or something, because you'll end up doing the exact same things, helping the same people, having the family. And when they realize you've got more time, they're kind of using you, let's say, that it's not you having the free time. So is that something that you kind of get people, get away from your comfort zone?
I tell you, right, you could do this work. You are good. Because no, you're exactly right. We always tell people, if you can do it, and it doesn't have to be luxurious, but try to get out of your home environment and take a big trip, or to your point, just go try living somewhere else for a few months, but do a big pattern interrupt, because the patterns you've been living are really powerful. And it's very unpleasant, frankly, to retire, wake up the next Monday morning and just be standing in your life without all of the stuff that you're used to doing. It's just kind of evaporated right in front of you. So we really encourage people, plan a big trip, or put yourself in a new environment for enough time that it feels like a true pattern interrupt. You've almost hit the reset button. And the other thing we tell people you've hit on is you've got to be very cautious that you will be asked to do things and get involved in things the minute people realize you're free. And you've got to be very careful. You don't get sort of seduced or flattered into doing things that really you don't want to do, even if they do pay you. Because, why would you do that at this point? I mean, especially if you don't need the money. And that's a very easy thing it's a trap that you can fall into. So we sort of tell people, look for the hell yes, right? Like the thing that you say, that I'm doing no matter what. That sounds amazing. And we help them kind of come up with a list of factors that are present when that's probably going to be more likely to be true. So we really warn people, guard yourself against that. Everything should be a no unless you can prove it's a yes to yourself, as in, I really want to do that. That's not just me filling time. So I think you've hit on two important things. Yeah.
I think no matter what age people are, even if they're younger, even if they're in their 20s, but like, this is something people should be thinking of, what they're passionate about. And the reason I was conscious of this when I started working, when I was in my 20s, I saw people, they were working all their life in an industry. They retired, and within 3 months they were dead. I saw that so many times, and I thought, this is so sad. It was like their life became their job, and don't let that be you.
Right. And I think so. We get, one of the things people will say to us when they work with this one in one of these programs, and let's say they're 60 years old or so, they'll say, I wish I'd done something like this 20 years ago. And what they're saying is, I'm reminding myself of all these dimensions of who I am that I've just completely ignored. Because of the demands of work. And I'm not suggesting the demands of work aren't real, and they aren't, they don't require us to focus incredibly hard. I know that, I was there. But to the extent you can make any space at all for these other parts of yourself long before you plan to retire, it is valuable, because trying to resurrect them and excavate them under decades of, having ignored them, it's hard. It's really hard to do. And, we have seen people go on and have second acts that are far more aligned with who they really are. And that's awesome to see when people can do that. I mean, they're actually living an unlived life, from 55 onward. And, look, everything they did before had value, but they're really living, a terrific existence because they did the work to go find that peace and believe in it,
Yeah, not excellent. And, the other side then is the serial entrepreneur, the person who's got a few businesses. I mean, that must be hard for them as well, because one, to say goodbye, because they're so involved in stuff. So how do you deal with somebody like that?
Yeah, it is very similar. I think in many ways, when you found a company, and we even see this with people who found, nonprofit enterprises, it doesn't matter. I mean, when you found a company and it's your vision and you bring it to life and you see it succeed, it is a huge part of your identity. And so what's interesting with those people to me is they're very good creators. So they don't have a problem creating, but they often have a problem letting go, because it is almost like losing a piece of themselves. And so what I think is important with people like that is you've got to sort of begin with the end in mind, I think, when you build things. And if you build them so you can let them go, right? Because you want to exit, you want to sell, or you want to pass them along, you've got to always remember that was part of your plan. And you've got to be building into what comes next in your own mind so that you don't fail to let go of the thing you built to let go of. It's a little bit like raising children and then forgetting that it's the art of letting go. They got to go take flight. So the good thing about entrepreneurs, though, is they are just incredibly creative people, and they're not usually afraid to fail. And so they can quickly bring themselves into the mindset of possibility. But I think for them, the trickier piece is seeing part of what has been successful about what they've created is that it can exist without them. And it's a little bit of understanding that is what you set out to do, to begin with.
Right. Like when I grew up, I remember most of the fathers weren't that connected with the kids. And it was like they were putting food on the table, I suppose, just working hard. But they were fantastic with their grandkids. And I suppose the knock-on effect with this is when people find something that they're passionate about, it's the whole family is actually benefiting, and grandkids and everything, because they just see a new person. And if they're able to earn from this, then they're able to kind of take maybe the grandkids to Europe or wherever, or do different things.
Yes.
So there's such knock-on effects to doing this.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think we all probably remember or have examples of older people who did not do well, right, in their last chapter, right? They left work and they went off a cliff. I mean, look, my father fits into that category. It's a sad story that I won't get into, but the point is, I would not have chosen to emulate his experience, and I don't think it was anything he did, intentionally wrong. It's just that he had absolutely no idea what his purpose was once he stopped working. And so I think if you remember people are watching you when you go through these changes, I mean, as an older person, there are young people watching you, your kids are watching you. If you show them how to thrive through every stage of life, that's incredibly valuable. And so we talk about that with people that, you are a role model, whether you want to be or not, to everybody who's watching. And if you can figure out how to thrive even more with every decade that comes, how is that not inspiring to everybody coming behind you? It is. And, it makes me a little sad when I see, people who are clearly, in late adulthood or probably one of their later stages of life, and they're bitter and they're not happy, and they're not exuding joy. And you sort of wonder to yourself, what was all that for? You must have worked hard. You've probably sacrificed a lot, and this is where you ended up. I mean, not to blame anybody, but it just seems like a terribly sad missed opportunity, and I think we've always got that opportunity to look ahead and say, what do we want? How are we going to make it happen? How do I thrive in this next chapter? But you've got to be the actor in your life to make that happen.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, I think people now are more conscious that governments, whereas 20 years ago, we all thought the government had our back and that they were looking out for, whereas now you realize they've got their own backs, they don't have our back, and you can't be relying on somebody else to look after you. You have to look after yourself, and you have to take control. And then it's fantastic that there's people like yourself, companies that can actually, hold you by the hand and guide you in with your experience, help you through that transition, because it's very important. I mean, it's like anything, you do sport or whatever, having a coach next to you it makes it 100 times better.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I think, that word coach can be loaded for people, because I think certainly I'll just focus on, like, again, the population I work with. They sometimes imagine that, like, why would I need a coach? I'm really successful and I'm smart. What are you going to teach me? And coaches don't teach you anything. Coaches get you out of your own head. Coaches ask you great questions. I mean, that's, and to your point, the top athletes in the world will always have coaches. They have multiple coaches. Why wouldn't high-performing people, period, benefit from coaching? They do. And I don't say that because I think of myself purely as a coach. I mean, I'm as much a facilitator and a consultant as I am anything else. But what's really going on in the room when we work with people is we're just helping them get out of their own picture. I always say to people, you can't see the picture when you're in the picture, and we're all in our own picture. So, when somebody's asking you great questions and leading you through a process to sort of paint a picture of what you want, and you don't even quite realize that's what's happening until the picture comes alive in front of you, that's what's valuable about it. So we always say to people, we're not going to tell you anything. You're going to create all the content that comes out of this experience. And that's why it's compelling, because it came from you. We don't have like solution A, B, and C that we pull off the shelf and hand you.
But that's the difference between whether you call it consultants or coaching, whatever, but that's the difference, because you're there just getting them that you're making them get into their creative minds. But on the opposite side, I know there's people and they're coming along and they're going, do this, do this, do this, do this. And that doesn't work. And it's like, you need somebody that's actually making you do the thinking.
That's exactly it. And then sometimes there are very consultative things we can add to the mix, because we've worked with hundreds and hundreds of people doing all this. So they may say, well, how would I pursue that? Okay, well, look, we've got a lot of knowledge about that. We can share with you, or we can put you in touch with people who can. But the fundamental value is exactly what you said. It's getting stuff out of yourself that's in there, but you just can't figure out how to get it out or organize it. And that's what we help people do. And it's a lot of fun, honestly. I mean, if you come in with an open mind, it's kind of a blast to create this stuff in real time and see it come to life, and then get excited about it and realize, what do I have to lose? I mean, I'm going to go down these pathways and see where they lead me. It becomes an adventure. It's fun.
Brilliant. And with the book, then I believe it's September that is coming out. You might let people know, one, the name, and what you're covering in it. Obviously, what a lot of the stuff we've been discussing. Yeah. I'm sure there's a bit more.
Sure. No, I'm happy to. And actually, I was planning to release the book in September. I've now moved it to February because of this wacky presidential election we have happening in our country right now. And I had a wise author who's very successful say to me, Elizabeth, do not release your book, 100 days before this election. Like, all of the oxygen in the room is going into that. So, I've now deferred it to February, although the book is fully ready and I've got an advanced purchase link and all the rest of it. But the book is called Encore, A High Achiever's Guide to Thriving in Retirement. And, that's really just about the fact that in general, I have worked with and am a person who, chuckles at the fact that I've always got to be productive and achieving something in my own mind. And so a life of pure leisure does not do it for me. It doesn't do it for my clients. And I actually sort of think leisure gets pretty boring if it's not, living in company with effort and some kind of purpose. So So the book has really got 4 sections. I mean, one delves into why retirement is challenging to begin with. Why is this concept hard for people when it sounds like a great thing, right? Like, oh, I get to just do whatever I want whenever I want. Well, why is that hard? That is a challenging concept. And how do you leave your comfort zone in a way that is beneficial to you? How do you bridge your identity? What are some ways that you can think about restructuring your life when you're on the brink of a change like this? And then how do you get into action? What are some of the strategies and methods for getting creative, getting into action, and pursuing new ideas that may feel daunting? And of course, there's some of my story in the book. There are lots of stories from our real clients who are willing graciously to share their journeys. And then there's a very practical chapter at the end, which is sort of a 6-month checklist. It's maybe 9 pages of stuff, right, that we have collected. So it's a very comprehensive list of things that probably you're going to want to tactically consider as you think about a change of this magnitude. So I hope it's helpful to people. It was really my effort to share on a much broader level some of the approaches and frameworks that have been effective for people. And, so for somebody who doesn't have the time or even the money or inclination maybe to work directly with somebody, it's a resource.
You see, I don't think people realize the value in something like that, because like they're getting your skill set, your experience and everything. And like people think you hold back, and like you're allowing the person that's not in the price range or anywhere in the world, because I think it's something like 130 countries this is listened to, like they can just get the book and they get, and like, as you say, like a check, because sometimes it's as simple as that. You go through the checklist and just reading on it. And I think just by listening to what you've said today, they know that you kind of understand what you're talking about. And it's like, oh, this makes sense. So, yeah. And just finally, because I know you do kind of one-on-one coaching, but you also do the group. So I'm just curious, is it group because people kind of prefer to like not be on their own one-on-one, or is it more of a financial thing? Just curious why people would do a group.
Yeah, absolutely. So for sure, I would say the group experience makes the fee more accessible, right? Because it is just simply the case that, to sit in a room, our premier program, it's one person with 2 of us in a room for 2 days. We go really, really deep. So it's, that's expensive. And it's just not for everybody. The group setting allows somebody to experience the material in a nearly, very similar way. Obviously, we can't go as deeply in a personal way with everybody, but they can self-facilitate or small group facilitate through a lot of it. And the other cool thing we've learned about doing the group sessions is that all the people that come together in those rooms end up becoming kind of almost a cohort who are going through this together. They're all on the brink of the same kind of change. They're probably similar age, similar stage of life. And it is really fun to watch how close they all get. They get to be friends. And, then they've kind of got a community of people who, could be all over the country or even coming from other countries who are going through this thing at the same time. And it's interesting to watch how they create their own community, their own network of resources, their own support system. So I think the group, surprisingly, in the beginning to us, adds a whole new dimension that I didn't appreciate, how valuable that would be to people. So it's kind of cool to watch.
Oh, excellent. Listen, Elizabeth, thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. You might let people know where they can find you.
Yes, absolutely. Probably the simplest place to find me is LinkedIn. Elizabeth Zelinka Parsons will bring you right to my LinkedIn page. Encoraco.com is the website where we offer the programs. You'll see my author page there. But again, if you're having a hard time thinking of the spelling for that, just go to my LinkedIn and you'll be able to click straight through to my website. So, but I really appreciate the chat. This has been a ton of fun. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you very much. I'll make sure I put the links both on the audio and the video. So,
excellent.
Okay. So that's all for the Speaking Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. Sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, share it with your friends, and comment. Let us know what you thought about what we discussed. And also, you can check out the program I was discussing earlier on, braingym.fitness. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. As mentioned at the start, you'll find my 6 podcasts on bio.link/podcaster. And also, if you'd like to start a podcast or do a podcasting tour, you'll find the information on that or on the QR code that's there. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, and share with your friends because it really helps. Until next week, take care.